Oh man, client onboarding is one of the most difficult parts of any new client relationship, but it's your firm's first impression. You only get one chance to get it right. So if it feels like you're pulling teeth in the client onboarding process, or maybe cleanup is a big challenge, or maybe understanding how to navigate billing with uncertainty in the first few weeks and months of a new relationship, this episode is designed to help dig into some of those issues to maybe fix some of the leaks in your process. Now, when I talk about process, there are two different processes that you need to be thinking about. One, what is the process that the client sees, feels, and is delivered to them? And then two, what is the process internally that needs to happen that may or may not overlap and intersect with what the client is also being given? There are two very different parts of the process, right? Because you've got your internal team that needs specific information, access, and data in order to make their role and onboarding effective. But then you want your client to feel as minimal disruption as possible. You want them to feel like it's seamless. However, oftentimes in the cleanup process and onboarding, you have to be highly communicative with a client on uncategorized expenses, on things like what's actually happening in their books. Why are they paying for a service that maybe they're not fully understanding of how it's impacting their business? These are all very challenging communication points in the life cycle of onboarding. So when we think about the process of getting a client in, we need to ensure that we've got standardized documentation and intake forms to collect the data that we need from a client. Maybe you're using a secure portal. Maybe it's a tool that has portal and questionnaire intake form availability. Ideally, you're capturing all of that information and storing it in one location and reducing the amount of duplicative input that the client needs to have in order for you to get started on the books. Maybe it's a standardized process that you actually send to them and say, hey, on these dates, this is what's going to happen in your business. Here's when we need access to certain bits of information. Here are the documents that you need to upload. Maybe that's consistent for every single client. If it is, fantastic. You now have the ability to upload that and send it to a client so that they know exactly what to expect. Of course, there's going to be variability in that. And so you need to customize this per client in order to make their experience really tailored to them. Like you're holding their hand throughout this process. They're well informed. And so in tandem with a consistent intake and data capturing process, I want to make sure that I've got a consistent communication framework. How often are we communicating with clients? Who is communicating with them? And what are we communicating to them? That's going to be really important for you to outline this in the kickoff meeting to ensure that they are aware of what to expect over the course of the next few weeks and months. It can be really disorienting when you kick off and you don't really know what the next step is. Maybe you gather a bunch of data, you get access to information, then you go heads down into work mode. The client doesn't really know what's happening. So you need to make sure that you're communicating with them. Here's what we accomplished. Here's how it will benefit you in the long run, but also here's still what we require from you in order to get our work done. When we think about cleaning up historical financials, it's often a big part of the work that CAS practices do because we need to create consistency and comparability in the financials moving forward. So some of the things that you can think about there is, what is the initial assessment that you're doing? Maybe it's in the sales process, maybe it's a paid assessment, but what data assessment are you doing in order to identify discrepancies and then prioritize how you're going to clean that up when you get into onboarding? This should be a consistent assessment that you're performing across all clients that you're bringing on board. Secondarily, what type of standardization are you going to be layering on to the books in order to create consistency for your team internally and more consistency for the reporting of your clients? Maybe that's a consistent naming convention and format of the chart of accounts that you use. That should be embedded in your process and communicated to the client of what benefit that is offering to them. Lastly, there may be migration tools that you're helping get data from one system to a second system. Again, it is imperative that this is communicated on the front end. There will inevitably be challenges in that, and data is never easy to move from one system to another. However, to the extent possible, when you're able to share with a client, here's what we did this week, here are the things that are missing from you, and here are the tasks that we plan on conquering next week. And some of this is data migration, some of this is data assessment, some of this is standardization, some of it's just like nuts and bolts categorization. Having a client in the loop on that process, even if it doesn't require action on their part, can be really helpful. Alongside of that, they should also be aware of what their expected time commitment is to you during onboarding. And it may take you a week or 2 weeks to like really dig in to understand what that time commitment looks like. But if you can start in a kickoff meeting by establishing, here's our general expectation of how long this onboarding process takes before we get into a cadence and how much time we believe it'll require from you and your team, that immediately puts the client a little bit more at ease. And then if you need a little bit more time, it's just a communication point. Hey, we're going to need a little bit more from your team to help us out on this problem that we're trying to solve for you in order to generate this type of value on the back end. One last point here that I want to hit on is just the billing process. Because there is a lot of variability in cleanup, in onboarding, in what you're doing for the client during this stage in order to set them up for success, it can be really hard to say, here's your fixed fee, you slap one cost on it, and then you move forward, because inevitably there will be payment processors that don't reconcile. There will be a bank account that was never brought up in scoping, and there will be all these issues that it just was impossible to discover during a very quick discovery process. So I believe what's really helpful here and how I've seen this deployed in best practice at a couple of great firms. Chad Davis has talked a lot about this of, hey, we've got basically a 3-month contract with our client to start to walk us through onboarding. And at the end of that, we will reprice them. We will say, hey, based on what we discovered, what we cleaned up, what we believe needs to be true in order for us to both move forward effectively, here's your new price. And or maybe you set up a dual model where majority of it's fixed, but then you have some out of scope items that are more clearly defined in your proposal that say this is actually out of scope, and maybe it's hourly. And or if it's not hourly, we need to come back to you for approval in order to adjust the scope to accommodate for those items. There is so much in the onboarding process that you just really hope and pray goes right, but it is so difficult without an established process, without an established communication cadence and expectation management of your clients. If you're able to nail those things and provide regular updates, maybe educational resources based on how your firm can help them be successful, and then incorporate feedback mechanisms from your client to help you understand what you're doing right to then improve the onboarding process, man, we are setting ourselves up for a high degree of success. There is so much here in onboarding. It's something that I think is mission critical for firms to be successful with as they move forward into 2025. I hope that's helpful. Till next time.